Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about the integration framework. In my previous videos, I talked about some basics, the integration architecture, the inbound integration, especially the FBDI, and the callback integration. But those are actually simple integrations. In real life scenarios, things can get much more complicated than this. For example, for the FBDI inbound integration, the data will normally be provided by the customer in the form of flat files so that they can upload the flat files onto the SFTP server, or alternatively, they can choose to upload the source data through the VBCS pages. So in this case, in order to ingest the data, we need to follow a step-by-step process. We need to do the data loading and ingestion first, and then go to the data processing and transformation, and then we do the data preparation for the FBDI format required by Oracle, and finally it goes to the file generation and upload for the FBDI data. So normally we need to involve the database. Okay, so this is about database programming, and we also need to do the configurations for different jobs. And when it comes to the data mapping, FBDI CSV files sometimes can have up to 200 columns. This is a wide range, even if many of them are not used or empty. So if we do the data mapping inside the OIC, it means that we're dealing with a big, mostly empty column set, making it hard to check and maintain. So I do not recommend doing this in OIC. It's more efficient to do the data mapping and configure this in the database. I will explain this in details later. So this is the number one benefits of using an integration framework. It will make it easier to maintain with the centralized logic and configuration for the database coding, for the job configuration, and for the data mapping. The next reason and benefit of having an integration framework is that it's faster to scale. If we want to plug into more new integrations, it takes a lot less time. And the third benefit is that there are consistent data processing rules across all data objects. What does this mean? So it basically means that all the incoming data is validated, transformed, and handled in pretty much the same way across the entire integration framework. So this can improve the quality, the data quality, and reduce the errors, and also simplify the maintenance. So now let's go to the integration framework diagram to have a look. In this diagram, on the left hand side, there's something called unified service integration. This one is the first integration of the framework. It is a simple integration and it acts like an entry point of the framework. And this is how it actually looks like. It receives the request payload and then goes to the database to extract a job definition for this particular job. And then it invokes the next integration, which is the data process service integration. So the reason this unified service integration is designed in this way is because it needs to run asynchronously. When an external system or a VBCS page triggers this process, we don't want the people to sit and wait while all the downstream processing happens. So for example, the user uploads the source data from the VBCS page and click the submit button. So after clicking the button, we don't want the user to wait. So what happens right now is that this entry point accepts the request and it goes to the database to get the job definition and configuration, and then hands off the work to the rest of the framework. So the data process service integration will be triggered by the unified service integration. And the data process service integration I would say, is the core integration of this framework. It follows a step-by-step process. So the first thing it does is that it triggers the data, data loading wrapper on. And by the way, those ones in green are database packages, and those ones in blue are integrations. So the data loading wrapper on receives the job configuration from the data process services integration, and based on that, it invokes the specific data loader for this job. So this is the data loading process. The next step is the data enrichment. What does this mean? To be able to create the FPDI data, actually, sometimes we need more information from Oracle system. So how do we do this? We need to create an integration to use the REST or the SOAP API to get this information from the system and then save it into the database. So this is called the data enrichment here. Um, to do this here, it uses a data enrichment service integration wrapper, and then this wrapper invokes the data enrichment integration for this specific particular job. And then in the backend, it invokes the data enrichment database package for this particular module. And the next step is the data transformation process. So this is to transform the staging data into the FPDI data required by Oracle. And again, it uses the wrapper package from the database. And the wrapper invokes the data transformation package for this particular job. So up to now, we've already got the FPDI data, and the data is in the database. So the next step, the final step, is to submit the data. So the final integration is a FPDI service integration. It does two things. First thing is that it extracts the data from the database and zip the data and put them into a zip file. And the second one is that it submits this file to Oracle system. One more thing about this FPDI service integration is that we don't build this as a wrapper integration. This is because the specific job must be selected within the adapter. Therefore, it is impossible to build this as a wrapper. So now, if we take a pause and have a look at this diagram, the question is, with using this framework, what are the additional efforts required if we want to plug in new integrations, and what are the things we need to do? Okay, now the ones that we need to create to plug in new integrations have been highlighted here. So from what we can see here, there are a few things. The first thing is that the unified service integration, it remains the same. We do not touch this integration. And the second thing is that from the database perspective, any new integration requires only 3 database components, or I would say programs, and each database program has a well-defined and clear purpose: data loader, data enrichment, and data transformation. It is very clear. And the third thing is, from the integration perspective, the developer need to do 2 things. Number one is to create a new data enrichment integration for the new data source. And number 2 is to update the FPDI service integration component in the data process service integration. So basically, for this one is to select the job from the adapter. It's quite easy. So essentially, from the integration perspective, there's only one brand new integration that is to be built. But of course, we're not talking about the callbacks at the moment. If we include the callback integration, then there will be 2 brand new integrations that the developers need to build for a new data source. So to summarize, this framework is a database-heavy OIC light framework, which means the database does most of the heavy lifting, and especially when it comes to data mapping. We actually keep all the data mapping in the database instead of the OIC. And by doing it this way, it's much easier to maintain. So it's good for the long-term maintainability. and it's much more scalable, especially when your FPDI template could have up to 200 columns to think about. And the other benefit is that it's good for team efficiency. So, which means it's easy for the new developers to follow. We don't want everyone in the project to write code in their own style, right? So, this framework can keep things consistent. Okay, I'll maybe go through the details in my next video. Thank you.